Bas, that's all. So where is the problem? Yeah, we don't want to listen to the history and all. We are starting from the end. Yeah, so he's saying respiratory problem. So it is in the respiratory system, but then which part of the respiratory system? It's such a big area. So what is making you think that she's got a respiratory problem? You just heard her. Cough. Yes, the cough itself is the respiratory problem. Okay, what else? Where is the respiratory problem? On your findings and everything. So you see, it's very important in the long case in respiratory system. It's all finite. They have slotted it into different morphologic diagnoses. So can you tell us, examiners, what are the morphologic diagnoses of the respiratory system? Bronchiectasis, yes. That's the MBBS diagnosis. Bronchiectasis, okay, yes.
Asthma.
Bronchial asthma, very good. What else? COPD.
Pneumonia.
Pneumonia, consolidation. Basically lobar consolidation, upper lobe, lower lobe, consolidation. Okay. Because when you say pneumonia, it is not just the anatomical pathological diagnosis, it is also including etiology into it. So we would want the morphologic diagnosis, yes. Pleural effusion, yes, the simplest one, commonest one, yes. No, that is etiology. So morphologic diagnosis is upper lobe collapse, upper lobe consolidation. So you are saying upper lobe collapse, you are saying lower lobe collapse, and middle lobe collapse, and lung mass, yes, pneumothorax, good, pneumothorax, and collapse, consolidation, lung mass, pleural pathologies like pneumothorax, pleural effusion, even pleural mass lesions, and bronchiectasis, bronchial disorders like bronchiectasis, chronic bronchitis, inflammation, and emphysema, disruption of the alveoli. Anything outside the alveoli, which is again a very common morphological diagnosis, interstitial lung disease. So you see, you have covered the entire respiratory system. Now, which one does she fit in? Now, there is another thing. We are talking about lung mass, but what about masses outside the lung? Mediastinal masses. So you can have mediastinal masses also. It can be in the anterior mediastinum, it can be in the posterior mediastinum. So what are the structures which tell you where the mediastinum is? Where is the upper mediastinum? In the clinical examination, what structure in the clinical finding tells you the upper mediastinal problem? And what clinical finding tells you the lower mediastinal problem? Which one? So I want to know about the upper mediastinum. What do I palpate here on clinical examination? Trachea, yes. So trachea is representing the upper mediastinum. And I want to know what the lower mediastinum, what do I palpate? Apex of the heart, yes. So he is going to tell us about the upper and lower mediastinum. Has it shifted or not? So tell us, has the mediastinum shifted? Because if there is a pleural effusion, it will be pushing from that side and it will shift to the other side. If there is a lung mass, it will also push. And if it is a collapse, it will pull. And it seems both of them are not affected. This is affected. Somebody was affected like this. And here, if you had a bigger tree, like their sisters, brothers, then if you saw somebody affected there, then it would be looking like this. It's transmitting like this. So what is this transmission? Oblique transmission. Whereas, if this generation was also affected, somebody was affected there and coming like this, vertical transmission. So vertical is dominant transmission, autosomal dominant. And the oblique would have been recessive. So we don't know the transmission here, but yeah, it seems like some familial problem is going on, and that too with hemoptysis. So maybe some pathology in the lung, which is because of a gene, which is causing that problem. Yeah, did you see, I mean, her tongue? Did you see you are supposed to tell us the findings. What are the findings in this lady? General examination. What are the findings in the tongue? What are the findings in the nails? Look at the nails and tell us. Koilonychia. I think it has been captured a little bit in maybe you can make it bigger and show us. Yeah, can you all appreciate the koilonychia? Yeah, if they had taken it sideways, then that thing would have come well. Actually, Ajit took it, later on didn't upload it. Okay. Yeah, the tongue. Let's see the tongue. Huh? Yeah, you shared only with me. How can I upload it there? It's Abdul's blog. So look at the tongue, beautifully captured. This tongue has been captured very well. So what is shown in the tongue?
So there is poor agility, there is angular cheilitis.
Angular cheilitis, yes. You cannot comment on the hygiene. Hygiene is a judgmental thing. You can only say whether there is inflammation or not or something of that. Yeah, and you can see that the tongue is also quite bad and there is angular cheilitis in this patient. So you can see that tongue is like glossitis. You can't see the papilla. It's a smooth tongue. So this again says iron deficiency and it can also be seen in vitamin B12 deficiency. These are the cause of glossitis. So these are very important things which should be for your. Trachea is also deviated to the left. Very good. So if his trachea is deviated to the left, what sign would we see here? Without showing the face. Yeah, you can see this. What is that sign called? Trail sign, isn't it? So what is trail sign? The prominence of that sternomastoid where the trachea has deviated, isn't it? So is it prominent? I mean, it's a subjective thing. You'll have to see and think whether it's prominent. But he thinks it's prominent. Not only that, he has also put his fingers here and he's seeing he's not able to go in much. Whereas here, he is able to go in a lot. See, he has went in this much here and here he has only gone this much. So probably it is all deviated here. That's why he cannot insinuate his fingers here. See, only this much I can insinuate. Very tight here. The strap muscle is very tight. And here I can still go in a lot. But then this is also subjective. If I am biased, he has biased me. So I have put my fingers a little bit inside more. And here also I haven't put my fingers a bit more. So that is called cognitive bias. Tell us about the mediastinum first. Where is the apex beat? Where is the trachea?
Apex beat more lateral to the fourth intercostal.
So apex beat is in the fourth intercostal space, but it is
More lateral.
lateral. So where is the normal apex beat normally located?
The middle of the clavicular.
So a normal apex beat is located 2.5 centimeters medial to the midclavicular line. So he is saying it is lateral to the midclavicular line. How much lateral? 4 centimeters lateral to the middle. That's very high. So it has been pushed. The lower mediastinum has been pushed like anything. The heart has been pushed like anything. Isn't it 4 centimeters away? That means 4 plus 2.5 centimeters away from where it was supposed to be. So there's a massive mediastinal shift of basically the heart, which is indicated by that. So who is pushing the heart to the left side? Is it the pleural effusion on the right side? Or is it a lung mass on the right side? Or is it some consolidation on the right side? Who is doing that? Or is it a pneumothorax on the right side? So this is the question now. So you see how the question keeps on changing. So, okay, so very good finding. He has given us some indication that the mediastinum is shifted. Other than palpation, what else? Percussion, very important, percussion. Next. So, So this is the clavicular percussion we start with. So this is how it is done. See, I can hear some sounds, but here it's dull. I can hear something here, but here it's dull. And let me do. Here also it's slightly dull. Right. More resonant. Dull. Resonant. Dull. Resonant. Dull. Isn't it? Resonant. Dull. Dull. Isn't it? So this entire. So when you percuss here, the normal cardiac rhythms is below the sternum here. This will be all dull, and a little bit will be dull to the left fourth intercostal space. That is where there is a cardiac notch. If you remember the lung, when you over the area of the heart. So But then in the lungs it will be slightly more resonant, but that difference in resonance here and the cardiac resonance cannot be made out by normal ears, but then physicians had abnormal ears. So they made this distinction between superficial cardiac dullness and deep cardiac dullness. Have you heard about it in your clinical books? Huh? Yeah, good. So you have heard about it, isn't it? So superficial cardiac dullness and deep cardiac. So deep cardiac dullness is the abnormal hearing of the physicians, which you have to imagine. This is lung, this is heart. So there may be some difference, but very difficult to make out by mere mortals. So, but what is the superficial cardiac dullness? That is the most important. Where is that? If you remember your picture of when the heart is opened, let's say you cut the chest and you open the chest wall, what do you see? That picture is there in your book, in your anatomy book. It should be there in your minds. How does the heart look like? Can you see the heart there? As soon as you cut open the chest, is the heart visible? How much is visible? That is the superficial cardiac dullness. How much is visible? Very little. Just a little bit on the fourth intercostal space, a little area. Why? Because there the lung has a lingual lobe. There is a small notch in the lung. So through that notch the heart is peeping out. So that is the superficial cardiac. So you will have a little bit of dullness only here. Plus what? In the sternum it will be dull. In the mid-sternum area, the heart is there and the lungs are not covering the entire sternum. So in the sternum, mid-sternum area it will be dull. Because the lung is stopping here. And then the lungs are giving a notch here. So it will be dull in the mid-sternum and then it will be dull in the notch. So that is the cardiac dullness. But you will be surprised to see in this patient, the entire area is dull, which is dull. Now here if you percuss, you will find that area, not only that area, the entire area of the precordium is dull. So what is happening is the possibility, because heart itself is a mediastinal structure. What is around the heart which can give rise to this kind of dullness? Pericardium, yes, so it could be a pericardial effusion. Is it a pericardial effusion? How to know? Or could it be some other mediastinal mass? Or could it be a lung mass which is covering that heart part, which has become, because it's become a mass now, that's why it's producing the dullness. So how do we know? Whether it's a lung mass or a pericardial effusion or something else? Yeah, so pericardial effusion may not cause rub, it will only be, rub will be present when there is no effusion, when there is inflammation alone. So yes, often with inflammation the pericardial effusion starts. So initially you have a rub, and after that when the effusion has come, you won't have any rub. And again the effusion is dying up, again you will have a rub. So this is how the rub happens. So here there is no rub, but there could still be a pericardial effusion. So how do we know whether it's a pericardial effusion causing the dullness, or it's a lung mass causing the dullness, or it is something else? So if she had such a big pericardial effusion, she would have symptoms because of that, and we could have known that. Okay, maybe clinically, is there any other way, Sophia? See, if there was a pericardial effusion like that, what would have happened to the apex? Would you have been able to appreciate it? You wouldn't have been able to appreciate the apex beat, which he is able to. He's saying it's in the fourth centimeters outside the mid-clavicle line. That means there's no pericardial effusion. And of course, the auscultation also, you couldn't hear the heart sound. You would have been muffled. So he's not heard that. They're not muffled. So this means that there is no pericardial effusion. So what are we left with? It could be some other mediastinal mass, or it could be a lung mass. The lung itself is there, covering that mediastinal area. So either a lung mass or a mediastinal mass. So how do we differentiate both? That would be difficult to differentiate, isn't it? So I think we have to do a investigation for that. What So when we see this X-ray, which is not actually a chest X-ray, it's a spine X-ray. In chest X-ray, it needs to be a PA view, but what you have here is a AP view, where the vertical column looks more prominent. So we are not really the chest per se. We are looking at the spinal and vertebral body. So let's go to some other X-ray, which is showing you how deformed the spine is. Of course, there is some rotation also, but still you can make out that there is a deformity of the spine here. So how does it happen? In COPD also, when you have a hyperinflated lungs, you can have such kind of a spinal deformity because of hyperinflated lungs itself, COPD itself. But it seems she has this since childhood. Somebody was saying. We got this X-ray. So this is a much more detailed X-ray where we take X-rays from all directions and then we make up an image, which is very. So here is where the problem with the percussion was. When we were percussing, this area was coming down, and you see it's looking like a very opaque, and there's no air program also here. A little bit here. Can we see another image? Yeah, unfortunately it's only taken 2. And here you see some air bronchogram. So when you see air bronchograms, that indicates consolidation. Very minimal seen here, but if you look at the entire CT in the rat spa, you will find that in many places there are air bronchograms. But yes, in many places very well deeply consolidated. So even our radiologist felt it was probably a malignancy which was behaving as a consolidation. So you see, when you make the diagnosis of the respiratory system, you have this morphologic diagnosis. So it can be a bronchial problem, which could be a bronchiectasis or bronchial asthma. It could be a lobar problem. So lobar problem could be either a mass lesion, lung mass, or it could be a consolidation, or it could be a collapse. So it can be upper lobar collapse, lower lobar collapse, middle lobar collapse, and similarly consolidation. So here is one of the morphologic diagnoses of consolidation. And we don't know whether there is a collapse associated or not. Whether that collapse has given rise to partial collapse, giving rise to consolidation because of infection. We do not know that. Because she is having this non-resolving consolidation for 1 month. So at that point of time, when the radiologist told us that it looks malignancy is a high possibility and this is a mass lesion, and we expected there would be a malignant growth here in the lung. And we did a biopsy here. So this is a low power view. Today morning we went to the pathology and Tawseef and myself, and we saw this, and this is one section of the lung which was removed, and you can see that there are certain areas which are empty spaces like what a normal alveoli should be, but in the other alveoli it's all filled up with these small dots. Now what are these dots? Let's go to the next higher power view. And of course some RBC is there. No, it won't be zoomed. It's a low power view. So let's go to a high power view. So this is, so now can you tell us what these dots are? Not very well visible, but yeah, these are the cells that you see in the blood all the time. What are these cells? Yeah, what we did was we got it in a pneumonia. Now the question is, why was the pneumonia non-resolving? Why 1 month? 1 month nobody has pneumonia like this. And that too, what such a pneumonia producing such a lobar consolidation, not resolving. What is happening? This is not a normal pneumonia by any scope. So in a way we were right. This was an abnormal thing, and most likely she still has some abnormality which the pneumonia is hiding. So what could that be? So we often know that if you have an endobronchial growth, it causes a collapse consolidation. So is this non-resolving pneumonia because of that endobronchial growth which is hiding beyond this CT scan, which we can only see by putting a bronchoscope inside the bronchi, and we may be able to see the bronch growth itself. And then we will take the biopsy from there, then we will get the diagnosis. And then we will be happy that yes, we have got a diagnosis. But the patient will not. For the patient, if she has only this is much better. But we can't explain how can somebody have a pneumonia for 1 month. Because non-resolved, of course, there is a chapter in your book called non-resolving pneumonia. And in that, there are many causes, and one of them is of course tuberculosis, another is malignancy, and another is some immune-mediated condition called BOOP, bronchiolitis obliterans organizing pneumonia. So often PGs do seminars on all these things. Could this be that then? And what is the immunopathogenetic basis of these conditions? That is what we have to look for. So this is how much we have to go deep. But again, it's finite. It's not a lot. So interesting.